The king of Syria invaded Israel. He marched his army right to the capital city of Samaria. He sent a message into King Ahab. He said, I want your gold and your silver. On top of that, I want your wives and your sons. Well, Ahab sent back a message and said, I'll give it all to you, and on top of that, I will give myself as well. King of Syria sent another message and said, one more thing, tomorrow I'm sending some people into your city. They will go through your palace and all of your best houses and take everything of value. Well, Ahab took this message to the leaders of Israel. They said, don't do it. We'll fight. So Ahab sent this message back to the king of Syria. He was furious. He says, when I get done with Samaria, it'll be nothing but a trash heap. I will totally destroy it. With that, he got together with some of the other kings that he had brought with him, and together they got drunk. As King Ahab was preparing his army for battle, the prophet of the Lord came to him and said, the army of Samaria is much larger than yours, but God's going to help you, give you the victory. Now, you are to lead your army into battle so that you can see firsthand that God is in control. The king of Syria was still drunk when he heard that Ahab was marching out of Samaria with his army. He quickly told his men, said, take the Israel men captive. I want them alive so they will become my slaves. But the army of Israel hit Syria so hard that they went running from the field. The defeat was devastating to the Syrian army. Even the king himself just barely escaped with his life. The prophet came to King Ahab and said, get ready. They'll come back next spring. The elders of Syria met with the king and said, Israel's God is the God of the mountains. They defeated you because you fought them in hills. Fight them on level ground and you'll win. So that following spring, the king once again invaded Israel. It was said that Israel's army was like a flock of goats next to Syria's vast army. But the prophet went to Ahab and said, they're saying that God is the God of the hills and that he has no power in the valleys. Therefore, God's going to fight for you to show them who is in control. And the battle started. Israel had such a devastating victory over Syria that over 100,000 Syrians died in battle. The rest ran home, but when they got to the city, a wall fell and killed 27,000 more. Even the king himself went and hid in a closet. Finally, the elders of Syria humbled themselves and went to King Ahab, pleaded to give mercy to their king. Ahab said, you mean he's still alive? My brother is alive? Bring him to me. So they brought the king to him, and the two kings met together and worked out an arrangement. When the prophet of God heard this, he turned to his friend and said, God wants you to hit me. The friend said, I wouldn't do that. The prophet said, then you have disobeyed God. A lion will come and kill you. And sure enough, as soon as he left, a lion jumped out and killed him. So the prophet turned to another man and said, God wants you to hit me. So the man beat him up. The prophet put bandages around all of his scars and bruises and sat next to the road. King Ahab came along and didn't recognize that it was the prophet. The prophet said, Your Majesty, during the battle, someone hired me to watch a prisoner. He told me that if the prisoner escaped, that I would die. Well, I got distracted, and the prisoner escaped. The king said, You fool! What you said will come true to you. With that, the prophet took off his bandages so the king could see who he was. He said, God told you to kill the king of Syria, and you didn't do it. Therefore, you will die in his place, and your people will die instead of his. Ahab left the prophet and went home, but he was no longer happy about his victory, but became angry and depressed.